Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Speak Your Way to Cash podcast. My name is Ashley Kirkwood, your host of the Speak Your Way to Cash podcast and the host of the Speak Your Way to Cash Live 2021 event that's coming up. I'm so excited about that. Today, we're going to be talking to Steve Shapiro about his speaking business and how he got his start and how he has lasted in this industry for years. So welcome to the podcast, Steve.
It's fantastic to be here. And when you say years, it makes me sound so old.
No. It's a compliment. It's a compliment. I know I wasn't going to say decades because then
it is decades though. It is.
I know, but I was like, we'll just say years. Keep them guessing. But yes, welcome. So tell us a little bit about your current business, and because I know you remember this, how did you get your start in the speaking industry?
Sure. So my current business is evolving like a lot of people's businesses, and they should be evolving anyway, even if it's not about pandemics. We should be evolving our businesses. So my main evolution of my business is, aside from the fact that everything's gone virtual, what I've been doing is I've also, in addition to doing speeches, been going deep with clients. So instead of 50 speeches a year, right now I'm trying to have 5 deep relationships, which are much longer term. And yes, speeches are part of that, but it's a different model. And that's really what I'm looking to do, is make a deeper impact with the clients, still do speeches, but deeper impact with a handful of clients.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So that's the model. And I got my start speaking decades ago. I was actually at Accenture, which is a large management consulting firm. And I was leading a practice there, and I was traveling around giving speeches. And one of the people that I hired is a guy who unfortunately passed away, but at the time he was one of the big thought leaders in business, and we hired him to speak, and we paid him tens of thousands of dollars for an hour speech. I thought, this is unbelievable. Like, there's actually that much money to be made. Now, he's one of the top thought leaders in the world, but still, it was very enlightening to see that this could be a career. And my first book came out pretty much 20 years ago, and that's when I left Accenture and started speaking full-time as my career.
That's amazing. And so I want to talk a little bit about how your business has evolved, because I would imagine even outside of the pandemic, the way that you landed clients may have changed. The sophistication with which you were selling, the strategy that you utilized. So when you first started, do you recall how you got your first paid speaking engagement, and how critical was the book to that?
The book was very helpful. I mean, I got several relationships, speeches, and longer-term contracts with clients because of the book. So it was very helpful. This was also 20 years ago when most people didn't have a book, because self-publishing really didn't exist at that point. So it was a traditionally published book. But the key for me has always been, and it still is, relationships. And as much as I always try to do marketing and cold calls and social media and all these other ways of building a funnel of getting lots and lots of people to know me, what I've found is consistently over the years is like 80 to 90% of my work comes from people who know me, have seen me, received a recommendation from someone who's seen me, from a bureau that I've done work with. Most of my work is some kind of referral type of business. And so I'm actually doubling down on that. Now, instead of trying to create a bigger pot of people who know me, just build a deeper relationship with the people who already know me.
I love that. And that's key. And I want the person who's listening to this, who's thinking, man, Steve, I wish I had people who could refer me, but for whatever reason, and I often find that this is not always the truth, but a lot of people think that no one can refer them right now. No one in their Rolodex has the connections or the pockets to get them where they need to be in their speaking business. But let's say someone really genuinely does not have a referral network. How would you recommend they get their start? Would you say the cold calling and the emailing and the marketing and all of that is helpful at the very beginning of your career, or would you always start with relationships?
I mean, personally, I've done cold calling a number of times, hired 3 different companies over the years to do cold calling. And for speaking in particular, I don't think I've not found it to be a successful strategy. Warm calling works. So to me, starting out, the key is the best marketing that we have as speakers is to give a speech.
Yep.
And so even if in the beginning you're giving speeches that don't you don't get paid for them, they're still not free. And I
Right.
think there's a big distinction. I will never do a free speech, never did a free speech, but I did speeches where there was some kind of compensation, even if it wasn't monetary. Maybe it's video, because video is so important. If I didn't have video, I would be willing to speak in order to get some high quality video, or maybe a referral or a testimonial, or just to meet if it's the right audience. So those are the types of things that I'd be looking for. And then I would just be getting out there and trying to, get my name out there as much as I possibly can, even just to get those free speeches, which I think is, or I should say unpaid speeches, none of them are free.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I just want to give that encouragement to those of you who feel like you don't know anyone or you don't have connections. What Steve said is so critical. So you can find associations, even corporations right now that would love for you to come in and educate their audience. If you are going to do something unpaid, this is my thinking on this. And I'd love to get your thoughts on this, Steve. I think versus doing something unpaid for at one single corporation, go to someone who has a variety of decision makers in their audience and give a very targeted, very well thought out speech to that audience in front of 50 plus decision makers and convert that into your first 5 or 6 engagements versus going one to one to one. If you have to do something unpaid, what are your thoughts on the strategy behind doing unpaid engagements?
Well, I think that's a great strategy. What you described is, in my world, there's 3 different categories of events that I would typically do. One would be an association, which is a lot of people from a lot of different companies sponsored by the association.
Yeah.
The second category would be a corporate event for their customers. Those were always my favorite if you can get them, because they typically have bigger budgets. It's not an educational budget. It's a marketing and sales budget. They're usually in nice locations and you get some pretty nice perks in doing that. And then you have the corporate events for their employees. And it really, I think it's important to step back though and say, what is the business model you want to have? And if you want to do a bunch of transactional speeches, then yes, associations are probably a great place to start because you have a lot of different people in the audience. And even if they're not the buyer, they might be somebody who would recommend you to a buyer. But if you're looking to go a little deeper with companies, sometimes dipping your toe into an unpaid event for a corporation, knowing that it could be the entree to more work with that company, well, that could be great too. I mean, in starting out, that's actually the strategy I used. Was I targeted companies, would do, very low fee or free events, which ultimately led to, 5 figures and in some case 6-figure contracts that lasted over a period of time. So it really depends on what your business model is. And I think that's the dangerous thing with any advice is you have to match the advice to who you are and what your business model is, not just taking some generic advice and trying to slam it into the way you want to do business.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And I think for a lot of speakers, and I would love to hear if you tried over the course of your career, different business models, what helped you to settle on the one that you have today? Because when you first come into the industry, everything I saw was like, I do 100 speeches a year. I do 50 speeches a year. I do 25 speeches a year. And to me, it sounded exhausting, but because that was the prevailing narrative, that's what I started with. I was like, okay, well, I'll just go to all these colleges. I'll just do hundreds of 50 to 100 speeches a year. I'll be on a plane every week. And for a little bit, it was fun. But me now as a mom and having so many different things going on and just realizing that as I get deeper in my career, my level of expertise grows, I can have a deeper impact with less clients going deeper, like what you discussed earlier. But I did try different business models. So what business models did you try and what helped you to settle on what you have today?
I think part of it is always personal preference. And so my business model started off with doing lots of speech. Well, actually, it started off doing more consulting work because I came out of a consulting background. But my goal was to leverage the book to do speeches. And so ultimately, when I launched my business in 2001, I did more longer term consulting types of relationships because that's what I knew best. But then as time went on and I started to get known, I started to do more speeches. And what I found was it was more profitable to do speeches than it was to do consulting. For the same amount of time, I could typically make more money. And what's interesting is I'm sort of going backwards, not backwards, that's not the right word, but going back to my roots in some respects, because what I'm finding is for me, the 50 speeches a year, being on planes, finding it tiring, but also I'm finding it not as satisfying as it used to be, because I really want to see the transformation in companies. And although I'm not doing consulting the way I used to do consulting, I'm doing a lot more advisory work and deeper work with companies so that we can see the results in a company. And that's, to me, the piece. So I've settled on it more for personal, have a sense of self-worth and value in the market. There's nothing wrong with being a speaker. I've decided over time, it's not really how I want to be perceived. I want to be perceived as an innovator and a problem solver, not a speaker.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I want to get to your topic because you've already kind of previewed it in your last answer. And I'd love to know how you settled on that topic. But before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about pricing, the big P word, because so many people struggle with pricing. And there's a lot of different ways you can price: value-based pricing, pricing by the hour, etc. How did you come up with your pricing? And do you have a strategy that you utilize to set up your proposals? Because now I imagine, if you're anything like me, we are typically submitting proposals for these deeper engagements that we do with corporations. So how did you start out with your pricing? And then how did you settle on how you price now? Any tips you have for that?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story. So I'm working for Accenture, and I've been doing a lot of speeches while I was at Accenture, in audiences of 5,000 people. So I had some great video. I had my book. So I had all the things that you'd really need. Came from a great company. And I remember meeting with a bureau. I was living in London at the time, and I met with a bureau and showed them the book, showed them my videos, like, oh, this is great. We're going to hire you. This is awesome. And I get a call about a week later, and they said, one thing we never talked about is your fee. We have a client who's interested in hiring someone, and we just need to know what your fee is. And I had no clue how to determine my fee. So I basically pulled the number out of the air, and I said $3,500. And that's the actual number that I quoted. And they said, thanks. And they called me back about an hour later, said, okay, we forgot to ask, was that 30? And they clearly didn't hear me correctly, because they said, was that $35,000 or 35,000 pounds, which at the time was probably about $55,000, $60,000. And I said, $3,500. And they said, okay, thanks.
They were trying to help you out.
Yeah, well, I called them up several weeks later, and I asked them whatever happened. They said, well, when you said you were 3,500, we knew you were the wrong person. We hired somebody, we paid them 35,000. And I was like, holy moly. So fees drive perception.
Yes.
And look, it doesn't mean you just start charging 35,000 just because you think people are going to value it. There has to be, more to it than that. But my strategy always was keep on raising my fee until I get pushback. And then when I get pushback, I'll level it off, and then I keep on raising it. And, but now it's like you said, I'm doing proposals. It's a different type of arrangement. Virtual to me is a totally different game also. The way I'm pricing virtual is totally different than the way I do in person, because I now have much, much more capacity. I gave a speech in Belgium this morning. Didn't have to get on a plane. Didn't have to deal with jet lag. I was, giving a speech for 45 minutes. That was awesome. I love doing it, so I can change my rates accordingly to be able to serve more people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And with virtual, I always remind speakers, you don't have to charge less for virtual. And one of the things that you have the ability to do with virtual that I talk about a lot in my programming is licensing. It's easier when you're doing it virtually. You already have it packaged up. You can control the platform and all of that. And you can sell 30, 60, 90-day annual licenses to that presentation so that everyone in the company, even those who aren't there live, can then have access to that presentation. So I love virtual for the flexibility and the capacity. Like you mentioned, you just can do so much more with that. And sometimes they're better presentations. So I love what virtual has allowed us to do. But I love what you said about, it sounds like you do value-based pricing, because it's not set on like your hourly rate, whatever that was at Accenture. It's not that. You're not bound by that. But you mentioned when you raise the fee until you get pushback. So what was so back in the day, let's say your first 5 years in your speaking career, what was the pushback number? Do you remember?
And keep in mind, sometimes the pushback number is a self-imposed psychological pushback number. So it had to get to the point where I could state my fee and like be totally comfortable that I was worth it. And in the beginning, I struggled. Now, keep in mind, this is 20 years ago, so rates have changed. But I remember I did start off at 3,500, quickly went to 5,000. And I wouldn't say really leveled off. It's been incremental changes over a period of time. To me, there was always safety in sort of the under 10,000 number. So once I crossed that barrier, it actually became easier to raise my fee. But then there's a point where I just said, you know what, I'm now competing with celebrities and I don't want to be competing with celebrities. So even though I've been told I could increase my fee more, I've decided to keep it where it is. And it's been this way for a while now, not because of pushback. I've actually been getting pushback that it's too low, but I feel that when I look at the value that I can deliver, that's the number I'm comfortable with. So a lot of it is psychological, and some of it is market driven.
Yeah, I like that. Now, because of your consulting background, were you more comfortable writing proposals than you were just negotiating your individual speaking fee? And if not, how did you develop the skill of proposal writing? Because I do think that's a whole separate skill.
I always found speaking much easier. They basically say, are you available on this date? And what do you charge? And, I'll say, I'll give them a number if I'm available. And then I also have a conversation. What I love about selling a speech is it's a conversation. It's not I never viewed it as, okay, this is my fee and that's all we're talking about. No, because I want to see, do they want books? Do they want things that could come before the event? Like what can we do before the event to actually drive interest? What can we do after the event? And in some cases, I don't charge for those, but to me, they're value added pieces that just get bundled into the price, which then become a differentiator. So I always felt selling speeches, when somebody reaches out to me, easier. The problem with selling speeches is there has to be an event with a slot for a speaker on your topic. And so I think selling speeches is harder from a push perspective, from a cold calling perspective, whereas I think consulting is a little easier to sell from that perspective because you're selling a capability. I see your organization's been struggling with, for example, sales. Okay, great. Well, I have a process that I guarantee you is going to increase your sales by 25%. That's a much easier sale to someone than it is to say, I'm going to speak for an hour and you're going to pay me X number of dollars and your life is going to be totally different. No, that's a little naive to think that the 1 hour speech is going to totally change the world.
Exactly. So the transformation you can provide on the consulting side is easier. So it's probably, in my opinion, it would be a lot easier to just affirmatively sell a consulting package because like you said, you can give some results or let them know like you can expect these results, or at least our other clients have seen results A, B, and C.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So right now, what are the streams of revenue in your speaking business in terms of where you're getting money from? Is it, so you have consulting, you've mentioned one-off speeches, you still have some books. Is there anything else? Do you do any licensing, any online programs and courses?
I do have licensed programs. So I have an e-learning course, for example, which is licensed out. It's been out for a while, so the revenues on that are less than they were before. Also an in-person course, again, that was licensed out less than before. But we're signing some new licensing deals that will totally change that relationship. So we expect more licensing revenues. But I also have products. So I have something called Personality Poker, which is a card game that I use during speeches. And people love it so much that after I'm done giving the speech, people buy the system, which is a deck of cards and videos and a whole bunch of other things. And so that's another form of revenue. So when I look at my revenues, it's still services heavy. It still is speeches and advisory work and keynotes and workshops and things of that nature. But I do have product and I do have licensing deals that contribute to it. And it flexes and changes over time.
Awesome. And then right now, because you have a very well-established brand, it's spanned over decades, as you said, not me, it's spanned over decades. Do you have employees for your business, or do you primarily work with contractors? And when did that kind of come into play? Getting a team, having people help you run the operation, and how have you navigated those waters?
So I've never had employees. I have had a number of 1099 freelancers do various work over the years. And as time has gone on, I've become more efficient at what I do. And if you think about it, as you move towards fewer speeches and more deeper relationships, well, there's less administration. So if I only have 5 contracts, for example, well, I can handle that myself. So I do pretty much all of the work myself, other than I have people who do, my website. I have a company that maintains my website. I'm not going to deal with that. I do partner with a number of different people who develop tools for me. So one of the other things that we've done is I've created relationships with people who see value in my content. They would build something, and then we do a revenue split, a revenue share on it. So, but all these people are independent people that I have either hired or give them a slice of the pie.
I like that. I feel like that keeps the stress down. Like handling a lot of it in-house, working with other people who are highly skilled, don't require a lot of input for you for their particular skill set, but they value what you do.
Yeah, for me, I've gone back and forth on some of these things. I used to think that as the speaker, if somebody calls and says, "Hey, we've got an opportunity, are you available and what's your fee?" I've always felt that if the speaker was the one who responded, that's bad. At least that's what I used to think. Now what I find is I called somebody today. I said, "Hey, see," they were like blown away that I actually called them personally.
Yeah.
And so I think, I think things are changing. I think this need to be separate, from everyone else, I think has become less important. The only thing which I've always felt was it's nice to have somebody else negotiate the fees, because I don't want to be the person who's negotiating fees, which is why I love working with the bureaus, is they're great negotiators when it comes to negotiating the speaking fees. But for the consulting work, I have to do it myself. There's nobody else who can do it. I wouldn't want anybody else to do it. And so as time goes on, I'm actually doing more and more of the work rather than less and less.
That makes a lot of sense. But I agree with what you said there about it can help to have someone else negotiate the fees. But on the other side, because we've had employees, we still have a few employees that we work with in my law practice. It's a huge responsibility. It's a huge responsibility, and it takes a lot of time and effort. And on the speaking side, we've always had an administrator, but for the most part, we work with contractors that are very skilled at what they do. And so it has kept, it's been pretty seamless not having so many employees that we're responsible for on that side of things too. So I appreciate you sharing that. So now I want to get to your topic, because you have an amazing topic that I want you to dive into for us. And I'd love to hear, one, explain to us what the topic is. And then also, how did you come up with that topic? Because I find that is the hardest part for newer speakers that I've coached and worked with, is like deciphering between all the number of things that they're really skilled and good at, to settle on one topic that they can really transform the world with. So what is your topic, and how did you land on that particular topic?
So the topic that I've been doing for 25 years is innovation, and everything I do falls under the category or the umbrella of innovation. My latest book is on problem solving as a means of driving innovation. I have another book which is on personality styles as they relate to innovation. I had another one which is on creating a culture of innovation. So everything I've done for 25 years has been around innovation. And the reason why I got into innovation was 25 years ago, I was one of the co-leads of a part of Accenture, which was focused on something called business process reengineering, which is basically going into a company and making them more efficient. We redesign their processes, make them more efficient. And one of the things that happened was when companies made their processes more efficient, they would downsize their workforce. And I woke up one day and realized I was responsible personally for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people losing their job. And I'm like, nah, this is not going to happen. Not on my watch, not going to do it anymore. I took a leave of absence. And then I started to think, well, what do I want to do? And I loved speaking. I loved helping companies, but I wanted to help them grow. Innovation back in 1995, 1996 was barely used as a word, but it's what I settled on. And so I've been doing that ever since. And I love it because I feel like I'm making a positive impact in the world with the work that I do. And that's why I do it. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. The topic actually chose me, and I feel fortunate that I was able to choose it, long before it became very popular.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one of the things I wonder about it, your brand is so clear. It's so clean. It's very clear what you speak about. As soon as you all go to his website, which I will post, everyone knows exactly what you're going to be speaking about. But has it been difficult for you over the years to stick to one topic when other people, I'm sure, have said, oh, can you talk about this? Or can you talk about that? Or you seem, based on your experience, that you'd be excellent at talking more about leadership as a standalone topic. Has that been enticing to you to like look at some other topics as well? And how have you kind of stayed the course?
So I had an interesting experience which helped me stay the course. So my first book was a hardcore innovation book, released in 2001. And as soon as that came out, my speaking career was a little slow, so I had a little time on my hands. So I thought, I'm going to start thinking about my next book. And so in 2003, I started working on my second book, and I decided I wanted to write a book that was about the concepts of creativity applied at a personal level rather than a corporate level. And basically what the book turned out to be, and it's going to sound like a strange concept, but it was called Goal-Free Living. It was on how to live a life without goals. And the reason why it became that is because I traveled the country by car and interviewed 150 creative people. And the thing they all had in common was they didn't have the same relationship to goals that other people had. They were much more relaxed about it. Didn't mean they didn't have goals, but they were free and flexible, and they allowed things to unfold. And so I wrote this book called Goal-Free Living, came out in 2005, put it on my website. And in fact, Oprah's magazine wrote a cover story on the book. And I thought, this is the greatest thing that could ever happen to me. And what was fascinating was it hurt my business. And the reason why it hurt my business is if somebody went to my website and they say corporate innovation and not having goals, they got confused. And my clients were like, well, wait, what are you? Are you an innovation guy? Or are you a non-goal guy? Or I have no idea what you do. Do you talk to companies? Do you talk to people? And that confused buyer never buys mantra really proved to be true. So I've not really talked about my Goal-Free Living book much, even though it's one of my favorite books I've ever written. But it's just something which is sort of, in the back catalog. And I've gone back to my roots of innovation. And once I did that and got clarity around that, things returned back to normal.
Wow, that is so powerful, because I imagine a lot of people listening are like, if I get the opportunity to be on the cover of O Magazine or one of my products is featured on that, it would skyrocket my business regardless of buyer confusion. But what you're saying is what I'm hearing is it seems like it's more important to have a consistent, clear brand than it is to have even a well-featured product if it causes brand confusion. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think it's always important just to point out, this has been my experience given my topic. Now, other people could talk about a different topic or have a completely different experience. So I'm not saying that, what happened to me will happen to others. I'm only just explaining my personal experience, which influenced the decisions I made. Somebody could do exactly what I did. The things that didn't work for me might work for them, and the things that I did that worked for me might not work for them. So we just need to be aware anytime we hear what someone else is suggesting. I mean, one of my books is called Best Practices Are Stupid. And the reason for that is if we blindly adopt what someone else has done, the odds are it's not going to work for us for a whole variety of reasons.
Yeah, you have to have the strategy behind it for sure.
Right.
Okay, cool. That's really interesting as well. So I appreciate you talking about that. Are there any other tips? Or I know you said best practices. You have a whole book about you don't love best practices, but are there any, is there any advice that you would give to a new speaker just starting out that was some advice that you received that was very helpful?
Well, I don't know if this is helpful advice, but I hired a PR firm early on, and I said, what is the key to a successful speaking career? And the answer they gave me was, and I didn't like the answer, and I'm not saying this is the correct answer, but the answer was 10 years. 10 years to build up your network, build your relationships, build your network, build all this, build your, your body of work. And they were spot on with me. At the 10-year mark, things really started to shift. It was close maybe to 8 years. I did the world's first TEDx event, the world's first large TEDx event in 2009 for NASA, 2,000 rocket scientists in the audience. 2010, A book came out with Penguin, which is a big publisher. 2011, my next book came out with Penguin, and things really started to steamroll between the TEDx event and the 2 books. And I think all of that was just a matter of timing and putting in the time. But I know people who've been able to do it a lot faster. I think it really, there's no right answers to any of these things.
No, definitely. I appreciate that. And that is important to know that some things do take time, and consistency over time makes it easier for people to trust you enough to refer you. So if referrals are an integral part of your business, I would imagine that would be very helpful, having the time put in. Well, I really appreciate the time you've spent with the Speak Your Way to Cash audience. This has been an amazing conversation. We've covered so much ground, from employees to the streams of revenue, to how you got started, to sticking to one topic and how that was influential for your career. How can people stay in touch with you, support you, purchase your books? Where would you like us to send everyone to you?
The easiest thing is just my website, which is steveshapiro.com. And I say Steve because Stephen has 2 different spellings, and sometimes people get the wrong spelling. I'm a Stephen with a PH, but either one of those works, Stephen with a PH or steveshapiro.com. And then I just have, if you're interested in like my latest work, which I think is maybe my most powerful work, it's invisiblesolutionsbook.com, which is the book that I published right at the beginning of the pandemic, which is all around how you can solve your most difficult problems.
Wow. Okay, cool. Really cool. And we will link to both of those things so that you all have access to that. Thank you again for joining us on the Speak Your Way to Cash podcast. We really, really, really appreciate it. For all of you all listening, go and support Steve's products and services. You can read any number of his books, check out his website. And if you are a speaker looking to start and grow your speaking business, then we hope to see you at Speak Your Way to Cash Live 2021 November. It'll be early November, virtual. Anyone can attend, and you can learn more about that at ashleynicolekirkwood.com/SYWTC Live 2021. Again, that's ashleynicolekirkwood.com/SYWTC Live 2021. Thanks again for joining us, and have an amazing day.